A very good afternoon to everyone present here. I welcome all of you to the fourth public lecture of City Lights titled Tales from Kolkata, New Labour in a Post-Industrial City, a collaboration between Calcutta Research Group and the Postgraduate Department of Sociology at St. Xavier's College Autonomous, Kolkata. Calcutta, once a thriving industrial hub in the 19th and 20th centuries, has transformed into a city of precarious labor and digital entrepreneurship in the 21st century. The city's history of textile mills, jute factories, and colonial trade has given way to a gig economy driven by IT, finance, and e-commerce. Today, Kolkata's workers navigate a landscape shaped by colonial legacies, which have led to industrial decline and urban decay. Additionally, post-liberalization reforms have fueled service sector growth and informalization, while digital disruption has introduced new occupations, skills, gaps, and precarious labor. Yesterday's mill workers and industrial laborers have become today's ride-hailing drivers, food delivery agents, freelance software developers, salespersons in shopping malls, care workers, to name just a few. In the fourth lecture of the series, City Lights, Tales from Kolkata, New Labour and the City, our esteemed speaker, Dr. Sabyasachi Basu Chaudhury, locates this new labour in the post-industrial city of Kolkata. He asks and attempts to answer, how is this new labour being generated by the changing times of the city, and at the same time, how does this labour redesign the space in Kolkata? I would now ask Poushali Boshak, a researcher at Calcutta Research Group, to introduce the topic further.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Poushali from Calcutta Research Group. Thank you, Moniparna, for such an elaborate introduction. We are very glad to be able to collaborate with the Sociology Department of St. Xavier's College. And we are extremely glad to be here from CRG, members, friends, and colleagues. Moniparna has introduced the session, today's particular topic. So I'll go back a little and try to just put a few lines on City Lights, the series itself, that we at CRG have been trying to conceptualize and also present at different institutions. So City Lights has been an endeavor actually to think about the city, to deliberate about city, the current city, the present city, but also drawing from the past and looking at the complexities of the city today, the complexity of the urban life today, the meaning of what it means to be in the city, occupying the city, inhabiting the city, migrating to the city, and also in interaction with small towns, with villages, with the peripheries of the city. As we know that city and urban studies are quite much in discussion in the academia. And we also have urban studies departments in certain universities, which has sprung up quite at least 10, 12 years ago in different institutions, even in this country. So the endeavor of this particular series of City Lights from CRG, from Calcutta Research Group, has been to actually talk about the urban in a more in a fashion where we can interact about the current emergencies and the complexities and the struggles that we are seeing in the city today, and to do it in educational institutions and with different other cultural institutions and other bodies so that it goes beyond the classroom. We are in a classroom today, but our endeavor is also to go beyond the classroom. So this is basically what City Lights series is. I'll actually, so it is about urbanization, it is about mega projects, it is about how mega projects has been impacting the city, it is about displacement in the city, evictions in the city, it is about how cities transform from, has been transforming from post-industrial cities to neoliberal cities, to logistical hubs, to various other ways in which cities characterize today. So all the characteristics of informality, of contestations in the city space, through protests, through claiming of rights in the city, through claiming of right to live in the city. So the city being the site of many contradictions, of different kinds of informalities, of slums, of bazaars, and which is very much a characteristic of the specifically the southern city. So the topics of discussion has been such where we have tried to focus on the southern city. I'll just read an excerpt from our concept note. Drawing its name from Charlie Chaplin's iconic 1931 Ode to the Poetics of Precarious Lives, lived in the interstices of wealth and prosperous spaces of the city, the lecture series City Lights will concern itself with the creation and recreation of the city in its phenomenological complexity, historical specificities of labor and wealth, its materiality and mobility, and with its present life as a palimpsest of the past. At the same time, as a site of logistical reorientations and infrastructural activities as part of a frenzied and continuous envisioning of a future. The future of the urban takes place in the city through the interaction between technological innovation and imaginary planning and enacted fantasies of change and enforced closures and reclamations of planned space. The urban future, governed and upended by politics of the city and the urban political, is also caught between aggression and care, violence of plans and regulations, and the contingencies of the informal, visions of the future and imaginations of the past, between generations, between greed of property accentuated by practices of profit-making and assertions of justice, care, and protection. Lectures in the series reckon with the making and unmaking of the city in history and space. I'll now invite Professor Sabyasachi Basu Chaudhury to the dais, and also Professor Shorbani Bandopadhyay to the dais. Professor Basu Chaudhury will be speaking on our title on this topic today, Tales from Kolkata, New Labor in a Post-Industrial City, and Shorbani ma'am will chair the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Respected chairperson, distinguished colleagues, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first thank the postgraduate department of Sociology of St. Xavier's College Autonomous Kolkata and Calcutta Research Group, as well as the CIFAR, Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, for giving me this opportunity to deliver this public lecture today in the City Light series. Today, in this series, I'm going to briefly tell you about the transition of Kolkata to Kolkata from an industrial city, a port city of the British colonial period, to a post-colonial, post-industrial city of the early 21st century. But this is not a story of a tale of transition of a city existing for more than 3 centuries. But it is rather a tale of transition of the labor, the workers in the city, in tune with the transformation of this particular city. It is also a tale of how and why a city pulling migrants from the different parts of Bengal, as well as from the neighboring states of Bengal, started becoming a city, pushing people outside. We shall also attempt to understand how the empire of capital changes a city and its labor to generate new forms of labor. When I'm saying new labor, I'm basically implying new forms of labor. And how new forms of labor try to negotiate with the changing times and space of the city. However, let me confess a couple of things before I begin. First, my storytelling may not be quite holistic in nature. Rather, I would underscore certain fragments of history of this city over a long span, and particularly focusing on the contemporary reality more. And second, my study is a work in progress. Therefore, I shall crave for your indulgence, observations, and questions. Please bear with me, and I sincerely hope that it will not be that boring. Now, let me first take you to the old Calcutta, or what was then Kolkata, when the village of Shutanuti, known for its weavers and cotton trade, and dominated by the local trading groups of Boshaks and Shades, along with Govindpur and Kolkata, was gradually transforming into an urban center. Calcutta was also turning into a port city from the 17th century. The gradual setting up of the industrial units in and around Calcutta during the British colonial rule had a seductive charm for the young men in the faraway places of Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh, as well as even of Andhra Pradesh, as this emerging city could offer them fresh and potentially better means of livelihood for fulfilling their dreams. When the traditional jobs in the agricultural sector and other traditional rural professions were not sufficient for many of them. Calcutta, with its imagery of more democratic and cosmopolitan space, was therefore turning into a model of modern urbanity. I'm saying modern as this city was perceived to have been the potential to escape the age-old traditions and superstitions of a primarily agrarian and mostly feudal society at that point of time in the 18th and 19th centuries. The labor-intensive industries of jute, textile, chemicals, heavy and small industrial parts, and subsequently leather industry, along with the main port in the empire's east, became hubs of large-scale employment. In spite of its famous temples, mosques, churches, which came with different groups of people, slowly settling down in the city of joy, Calcutta primarily emerged as an industrial city. The setting up of these industries, the settlement of the Europeans, wealthy landlords, rich business families, all increased also the demand for domestic help, cooks, plumbers, porters, dock workers, hand rickshaw pullers, horse carriage drivers, apart from the industrial workers in Kolkata, which was Calcutta. Over and above, the city also emerged as the colonial seat of power of the British Indian Empire. These psychologies of optimism survived the most part of the colonial rule in spite of the minor ups and downs during the colonial history. But that is another story which I shall skip here. These colonial industries survived even in the early 20th century, although the capital of the British Indian colony shifted to Delhi in 1911. Meanwhile, there was a futile attempt by the colonial rulers to divide Bengal in 1905. As the time forged ahead and the European powers started fighting each other in their own continent, the City of Hope succumbed to the aerial bombing during the Second World War. At the same time, it had huge number of people without any food, struck by the Bengal famine. However, the final blow to Bengal and Calcutta came in the form of the partition of the Indian subcontinent in 1947. This partition of territory affected mostly the people of Bengal, Punjab, and India's northeast. And the economy and society of Bengal definitely got fractured. The raw jute grown in plenty in East Bengal, which was East Pakistan since 1947 and Bangladesh since its liberation in 1971, was no more available that easily for West Bengal's vibrant jute industry as it used to be before the demarcation of new boundaries by Sir Cyril Ratcliffe and his colleagues. Over and above, the partition brought thousands of refugees from East Pakistan to the city and its outskirts. The city, facing acute unemployment problem as well as housing problem, suddenly started expanding towards both the south and the north, beyond the railway tracks which were till then the boundaries of Calcutta, with the setting up of squatter colonies. Official rehabilitation schemes and plans were not sufficient for these refugees, these uprooted people, although the government of West Bengal took several initiatives to rehabilitate the refugees through the schemes of Calcutta Milk Supply, Calcutta State Transport Corporation, Rehabilitation Industries Corporation, RIC, and so on. The industrial sectors of the city of Kolkata, which was renamed in 2001, started facing further problems in different forms. First, the increasing mechanization of production displaced a large number of labor. Second, for instance, in jute industry, less availability of cheaper raw jute and the more acceptability of synthetic fiber, along with the poor imagination and management of many jute mills on both sides of the Hooghly River, brought severe blows to this sector as a whole, as well as to its indigenous and migrant labor. Third, the constant tensions between the state of West Bengal and the union government were deeply damaging for the industrial sector of Kolkata and its suburbs, its outskirts. Finally, the process of informalization, casualization, and contractualization of labor, already there in the Indian economy in different forms, increased exponentially since the late 1990s with liberalization, privatization, and globalization of the Indian economy. The increasingly sick industries were unable to accommodate the traditional labor force who earlier migrated to Calcutta and its suburbs. The sunrise industries, like the IT and other industries, coming up in Kolkata's satellite townships of Salt Lake, Newtown, and Rajarhat in the east, could not offer lucrative jobs for the retrenched and less or differently skilled labor of the sunset industries like the jute industries and other industries I mentioned earlier. The famous leather industry in Tangra and Topshia had to be shifted to Bantala and East Kolkata, which is now called East Kolkata Township area in the eastern outskirts of the city of the Eastern Metropolitan Bypass, on account of testimonies of environmental pollution and the subsequent judicial decision in favor of such relocation of the same. All these transformations of the city of joy pushed hundreds and thousands of toiling people to the swelling service sector, about which I'm going to talk about. But before that, let us also discuss about the agrarian sector, the crisis of the agrarian sector in Bengal and elsewhere. The so-called Green Revolution of India is a contested development. First of all, the changes brought about in the techniques in the agrarian sector, like the use of improved quality of seeds, irrigation facilities, use of tractors, chemical fertilizers, and so on, remain largely confined to Punjab, Haryana, and also parts of Uttar Pradesh, apart from a few southern states. Second, the use of modern technologies in agriculture was not supplemented by any policy of land reforms, thereby, in a way, facilitating the traditional system of inequality in the agricultural sector between the landlords and the landless laborers. As a consequence, there has been enrichment of a sector of farmers with significant amount of land ownership, as they could corner and utilize these modern techniques with their wealth, and the poor landless laborers became poorer. The sporadic presence of the banks in the rural and remote areas after the nationalization of the banks in the 1960s, and among the less privileged agricultural workers or among the owners of small plot of land, made these people more dependent on the Mahajans or Shahukars or local moneylenders of different kinds, who usually charge higher rate of interest than the banks, with mostly insensitive staff who are more interested for transfer to the urban centers for better livelihood. This has also led to large-scale farmer suicides in the Vidarbha region of Maharashtra and also different parts of Andhra Pradesh and elsewhere in the country. Sometimes the introduction of the genetically modified seeds for higher yield per hectare of land, which require more supply of water, has failed the poor farmers miserably, with no option left in lives with ever-increasing debt. In case of West Bengal, however, the policy of land reforms since the late 1970s partially ensured a more egalitarian society, largely dependent on agriculture. But at the same time, this also fragmented the land. The possible cooperative system did not develop to provide support to small farmers for more agricultural yields and produce multiple crops. Therefore, in many parts of Bengal, the agriculture is no more that profitable. This has encouraged more and more young villagers either to migrate to Kolkata or to the other states of India or even to the Gulf countries to work as labor. Against this backdrop, when the second decade of the 21st century started introducing digital technologies in different sectors of the economy, society, as well as culture, when the Android technology-enabled smartphones started making inroads to every nook and corner of the once colonial city, the post-industrial city of Kolkata also began experiencing platformization of labor. With the technological innovations and changing character of economy, with the vanishing of the existing factories and dwindling importance of the Kolkata port due to the accumulation of silt in the Hooghly River, the urban geography of Kolkata began changing rapidly. The space of the city is now being constantly reproduced as the traditional urban middle class and underclass are practically being pushed out of the main city, as they are being replaced by more affluent upper class and upper middle class population, settling themselves in the gated communities of condominiums. To fulfill the needs of changing times of the city, fresh forms of labor are now required in large numbers. Salespersons in the shopping malls, caregivers in hospitals as well as in individual homes to take care of the elderly, ailing and lonely people, and children. Delivery partners to deliver food, groceries and medicines, and the other necessities as well as consumer goods at doorsteps in minutes. To drive the private vehicles of the new middle class and app-based taxis or cabs, or to provide security to the homes, shops, banks, ATMs, shopping malls, schools, colleges, universities, and even the marriage houses available on rent. There is also a constant demand for construction labor. First, the old dilapidated buildings and the buildings abandoned by the non-resident Kolkatans are mostly being demolished, and in a very few cases being remodeled after the death of their parents and other near and dear ones. Second, more construction labor is required when the huge plots of land, once used by the vibrant jute mills, machinery manufacturing units of sewing machines or ceiling fans or glass factories, in and around the city and across the Hooghly River are now being modified for construction of either gigantic gated communities comprising premium apartments, duplex flats, or bungalows at skyrocketing price in view of an ever-increasing demand from the newly affluent society. Third, as the city is attempting to have a web of railway network within it as part of the mass transit system, more construction sites need more such labor. More of these new forms of labor of the city are in the informal sector, mostly without any job security, health security, or medical insurance for that matter. In the meantime, as the temporal understanding has changed significantly in these neoliberal times, there has been spatio-temporal transformation of the city. For instance, the hand rickshaw pullers has largely been replaced by the cycle rickshaw pullers, and of late by motorized rickshaws or totos as they are called in some parts of the state or the city. Three-wheelers called auto rickshaws in this city have become visible almost everywhere. The traditional, sometimes shabby malls, shabby marketplaces are getting eclipsed by huge and smart shopping malls. As the city has extended towards the south, east, and north with its middle-class population, these malls have also struck roots in and around the city. The days of local grocery shops are being numbered as the inhabitants of the city are eager to procure anything in any hour of the day or night in minutes. It may be 10 minutes, it may be 15 minutes. And this service is being easily available through the app-based platforms for such quick commerce. Now let's talk about a city which was industrialized, then it was deindustrialized, and now we may call it a post-industrial city. A post-industrial city like Kolkata is usually dominated by the service sector, along with very few footloose industries at the edge of the city. Such cities often exhibit marked inequality of income and its distribution on account of the contrasts between those who are appropriately skilled, like professionals, managers, administrators, and those in high technology service industries on the one hand, and the poorly paid service workers who look after their needs together with the unemployed on the other. While the former can afford high real estate prices, the latter either commute to the city every day in overcrowded trains or look for a small corner in the shanties and slums of the city. The Fordist production was characterized by a century-long endeavor to curtail the length of the working hours for workers. The legally defined working hours in India encouraged new definitions of formal freedom of workers at one point of time. The classic instance of how post-colonial India began its industrial journey was the Factories Act 1948, particularly with Chapter 6 defining work hours and other related issues. However, with the onset of neoliberal economy, like many other countries, in India also, capital became concerned with, I quote, the correct use, unquote, of time to enable the correct use of bodies in production. New disciplinary forms to achieve this coordination in production plans and supply activities were invented. In fact, the city by itself became the site of such coordination. It was, however, never going to be a stable coordination of correct use of time and correct use of bodies. Cities became more and more anarchic, with unruly bodies disrupting the schedule of time. Yet, the combination of correct use of time and space has continued with transforming the city into a logistical hub with zones, corridors, and transit points in place. The city today depends on its logistical life, which in turn relies on global geopolitical and geoeconomic connections, route relays, interlocking, zoning, stocking, and transits. This was the setting against which the cheap edge, if I may use the term, and its collateral ever expanding digital technologies began facilitating the instrumental coding of the bodies. The goal was to generate a body-machine complex able to absorb varied subjectivities and produce through the disciplinary modes of coordination and control. The city is the great laboratory where the overall design is experimented and tested, where the labor is made more docile, as Michel Foucault once said. In this emerging scenario, attempts are on to mystify the absence of freedom. In other words, a condition of unfreedom inherent in the new forms of labor contract, such as in platform economy, where mostly it is a contract between partners. It's not a contract between the employers and employees. As equal deals between labor and capital. As if labor has agency in the new urban economy. In reality, labor's non-presence or non-representation in the domain of production of goods and services is now being formalized, I would argue. Although the production function is still largely dependent on these workers, the semi-invisibilization or entire invisibilization, in case particularly of the undocumented migrants whom we prefer to not to recognize of labor, is part of the new labor code, paradoxically accompanied by identification, welfare distribution, and surveillance technologies. It's a combination of all. Supply of necessities of survival and codification of bodies go therefore hand in hand. Neoliberal economy prefers to theorize labor as a lifeless and disembodied factor of production. In today's ever-expanding platform economy in India and elsewhere, labor in the huge warehouses or dark stores in faraway corners of the city are advised to avoid drinking water so that they need not require any washroom break. These developing models now inform how work is organized in the post-industrial city like Kolkata. To build a new empire of capital, neoliberal economy requires the ability to leverage different spaces against each other. It also requires the ability to leverage different bodies. Certain bodies should be given more primacy than the other bodies. This requirement owes its origin in the fact that the neoliberal economy is predicated upon a racialized and gender-ordered hierarchy of bodies, an accompanying racialization of space, where I can go and where I cannot. These delivery persons cannot, quite often, they cannot enter into the gated communities. They have to leave the deliverables at the entrance with the security personnel of these gated communities. In a way, the migrant workers are simultaneously situated in both their host city and their traditional societies of origin. Herein comes the question of reordering of space. In this manner, they continue to form a part of the fabric of everyday life and social relations in their native village, while also becoming part of the socio-economic processes in their host cities like Kolkata, thereby making home and host cities a greatly expansive social space. These linkages are multi-layered and entwined in the lived experiences of migrants, as well as the families and communities they leave behind. Given the magnitude and intensity of these processes, there is a need to assess the implications of these large-scale migratory trends and the lived experiences of migrants on the existing geopolitical discourses and understandings. It is important to examine how they reproduce and intersect with or redefine the predominant geopolitical narratives and intersect with the kind of spaces that are emerging now. This may provide a wider understanding of the role and power of migration as a mechanism of everyday geopolitics, which seems to renegotiate the existing boundaries and power relations. This may help us to have a more nuanced understanding of how perceptions, daily experiences, survival strategies, and livelihood practices of migrants and their left behind families and communities play a central role in reshaping notions of territorial belonging. Processes of globalization and geopolitical relations shape lives of labor and involve contestations over power as well as over authority. At the same time, migrant and other informal workers contest from below these hierarchies and from time to time severely damage the geopolitical relations by which cities link to each other. Slavoj Žižek, in his latest book, Against Progress, which has been published in 2025, this month only, reminds me again of Christopher Nolan's famous film entitled The Prestige, which was first released in 2006. In that film, a magician performs a trick with a small bird, which disappears in a cage, flattened on the table. A kid in the audience starts crying as he feels that the bird was killed. The magician approaches him and finishes the trick, gently producing a living bird out of his hand. But the boy was not convinced and insisted that this must be another bird, the dead bird's brother or sister. However, after the show, one can see the magician alone putting a bird squashed into the trash where many other dead birds lie. The boy was right. The trick, after all, could not be performed without violence and death. But it relies for its effectiveness upon concealing the squalid, broken residue of what has been sacrificed, disposing of it where no one who matters will see. Now, let me tell you only one narrative I will share because of the paucity of time. He is a gig worker. This is the story of one Rakesh Kumar. He is a worker in today's platform economy, working in this city even now, where the mechanization of task allocation and performance, in the platform economy, performance management has resulted in a shift of managerial responsibilities from humans to machines. Rakesh, who is 36 years old, a resident of an overcrowded slum in Kolkata, is one such migrant from the Ara district in Bihar. He is a driver for the ever-expanding platform-based car-hailing industry. To earn more in a competitive sector, he uses 2 or 3 apps of different companies. One of Uber, another of InDrive, the third one of another company, Ola. He leaves for the day at 7 o'clock every day in the morning to return home not before 10 at night, and on the worst days, he may have to work past midnight also. At the daybreak, he first goes on foot to the garage where the car is parked, about 1.5 kilometers away from the dingy room in his slum at Belgachia. After checking the car for the day, he's usually on the road with his vehicle by 8 a.m. He drives this car 6 days a week. For his first trip, he chooses from the first 2 options. As farther wait, it could be more lucrative, but it may also waste his time during the rush hours. Waiting for more surging of fare during the office hours becomes risky for Rakesh. He has to drive the car for the entire day to earn about rupees 2,000 to 2,500, from which he has to pay 40% of the entire earning to the owner of the car because he doesn't own the car. He also has to spend at least rupees 100 for his food and snacks in between his trips, apart from sometimes repairing the tire or other things. Sometimes Rakesh cannot even break for lunch or visit the roadside washrooms if there are better fare offers. He feels an acute pain in his head quite often, but does not have that much savings to even visit a doctor and buy medicines if required, as he has his parents, his wife, and 3 kids to support back home in Bihar. He is also worried about the fines, mostly without any receipt, imposed by the traffic cops in the city on account of violation of traffic rules. Rakesh faces different forms of common occupational health and safety hazards and challenges, including potential road accidents, physical and mental stress, and verbal assault from cops and sometimes even from the passengers. He is also concerned about lower ratings through app, which is very important in platform economy. Without any rhyme or reason whatsoever, his rating sometimes drops after he drops a passenger at his destination or her destination. He thinks that this may primarily be due to his, kind of performance or lack of performance. Otherwise, he doesn't find any logic. He currently has, and when I talked to him 2 weeks back, he had an overall 4.82 rating out of 5, but fears that frequent low rating may further drop his overall rating, and this may endanger his work opportunities, work potential. He's curious about the algorithmic management of the concerned platform, as he fails to comprehend how his share of fare is determined. Sometimes the company, they cut about 30%, sometimes even more, although there is a surge in the fare. And why his ratings sometimes move down without any reason, he cannot think of. The platform model allows the production factors cost to be reduced through the exploitation of the property of workers, who are most often owners of the means of production in the new system, by putting them in competition with each other, competition among the bodies, in order to provide the service. In the capitalist enterprise, the ownership of the means of production was concentrated in the hands of the shareholders. A property right is defined as a socially validated right to choose the uses of an economic good and thereby to control the labor process. But in the case of the platform economy, it is the worker user who formally owns the means of production. That is his body. Of course, the shareholder remains the owner of the intangible capital, that is the rights to ownership of algorithm, namely in the form of copyright. In short, the platform no longer exists as a separate space from the market, characterized by hierarchical relations and the formalization of the relationship of subordination, allowing the exercise of authority. The platform is no longer an island of conscious organization in the sea of unconscious market interactions, but a kind of farm market hybrid coordinating social actors who are no longer employees but self-employed people competing formal market shares. In the case of the platform, the farm is nothing more than a legal fiction supporting a set of contractual relations between individuals. A light and flexible central structure with subcontracts externalizes and controls from a distance without organizing the work. Moreover, while leaving them free to choose what we hear and what we read from newspapers and different articles and books, that they are free to choose their services or their schedule, when to work and when not to work. The platform continues like the classic company to set the cost for the user and the remuneration for the worker. In this sense, platform capitalism is reminiscent of the predatory mechanisms typical of the feudal economy, much more than the pre-salaried modernity. Many would argue that this is an era of techno-feudalism. I'm not going into that. In the platform economy, value is directly extracted from the social by the market through the immaterial tool of the algorithm that allows the accumulation of information to the last point, to minimize losses and accumulate profits. In other words, the platform model no longer corresponds to the paradigm of the classical farm. It blurs a series of distinctions that are used to structure the farm and to characterize the instrumental nature of work. Not only the distinction between inside and outside the farm work, but also between professional and personal life, ownership and subordination, producer and consumer. Finally, even the distinction between the principal and the agent seems to disappear in the dream of an algorithmic and more efficient management that would be finally fair as it is impersonal. Let me conclude with the excerpts from a famous Bengali poem written by Shukanto Bhattacharya that was musically arranged by Sholil Chaudhury and sung by Hemanto Mukhopadhyay long ago. The translation is mine, therefore please excuse me for any lapses whatsoever. Runner, tireless postman of the countryside, delivers the news, good and bad, to every doorstep, but who indeed cares for him? In this manner, he has left behind many years. Hungry man, he has been delivering mails, bearing the load of the world, his breath running out of steam, the soil beneath his weight with his sweat. They have bought away all his nights at a fall-away price, while his beloved spends sleepless nights alone with anguish and passion. Runner, O runner, we now see the faint lights of daybreak. Will that tender touch of light help to remove this unbearable weight of nothingness? Runner, the tireless postman of the countryside, now is the time to bring good news. Thank you very much.
Professor Sabyasachi Chaudhury, for your lecture. It reminded me of many things, particularly since you looked at the transition first from the founding of the city through industrialism, then deindustrialization, and finally what we have seen, the emergence of a platform-based economy. You had referred to the deindustrialization resulting particularly with the closure of the textile mills, jute mills, mainly, and that is also because of a result of partition. I am also reminded of a work that one of my friends did on the closure of the textile mills in Bombay, and how similarly these lands have been then converted into gated communities. And I have a sense when you mentioned about the city now becoming the city of shanties and slums, rather the shanties more than a proper built slums. I'm just thinking of the city of Bombay, that it's increasingly coming into that. And what when we teach during urbanization and industrialization how the control over the means of production shifted, not from the laborers to the owners of labor power. Here we see that there are owners of labor power. They don't necessarily always own the means of production. So the car, the motorbike, all these could be owned by the person who's giving the labor through these app-based services. But here, instead of this helping that person, it becomes more of a liability, because as if by some invisible hand, some kind of ratings, our ratings, decide the future of these laborers. So I'm really curious about this whole theory of techno-feudalism, which I think becomes so apt for our situation. Anyway, it's now open for questions from the audience. I think we can take a few more and then you can respond.
Sir, excellent deliberation. I have an observation. This is regarding the development of new technologies, electricity, for example. With the development of electrification, electricity as a new technology in colonial Calcutta, pankha coolers completely disappeared from the scene. And I think this can be a good reference point for your
I have a couple of questions come observations. I'm thinking about your contention that the city changes with new forms of labor, right? And then I was thinking about how with platform economy, for example, there are spaces that are designated as hubs. So a Blinkit rider, partner, driver, whatever they are called, would have to be present near a specific Blinkit hub or in order to get the kind of orders that they expect to get. So the city then also gets divided, and then there are spaces in the city which cannot be delivered to, for example. And this, so then the city also gets actually spatially reorganized by some map that we as users do not have access to, but for the laborer themselves, the city is part of places where they can go, they should go, or they ought to be near in order to maximize their earnings. And so I really think that this can be something that you delve into more when you're thinking about platform economy. But I was also thinking about how cities are transforming in the way in which they're becoming hotter, right? And the kind of labor that all of these include involve being out for many, many hours, exposed to the harshest and increasingly more and more harsh climatic conditions, which perhaps is also another crucial difference from the former mode of industrialized labor, where the factory, although difficult to work in, but would have a certain set of conditions that one has to negotiate. But being constantly out in the open, with the change of weather and increasing chances of severe weather conditions, this keeps on fluctuating. Even working conditions are no longer something that one can count on.
So, thank you so much for this outstanding information. So, my question is how the service sectors and the platform economy is reproducing the one-dimensional man, and how is it facilitating the homogeneity in the affluent society? Thank you.
First, yes, let him respond to these questions and we take.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your comments, observations, and questions. That will definitely help me to, reformulate my ideas in a better way. First, with what Honorable Chairperson has mentioned, I'll go into that. It is about, the closing of cloth mills in Mumbai. And the situation is absolutely similar because the gated communities have come up or are coming up in the spaces, in the, left out places, spaces of the earlier cloth mills, which were famous at one point of time. So this is a similar situation. I'm not going into that. But I will come to the question of techno-feudalism later. Now, when you asked about, the workers, the labor in Bengal, they are hesitant to work. That is, we have to look at this issue from two perspectives. First, it was a perception earlier. Because when the Bengali middle class people, even without any employment, were not very, eager to work in where you have to work hard with your manual labor. So you won't find a single Bengali worker in the Posta Barabazar area who is working as a porter, loading and unloading in the trucks, huge trucks, the items we use as essential commodities every day. But now we will find that many middle class Bengali elderly people, younger people of course, they are shifting to this platform economy. Because in a way, when I'm going out with a motorbike, if I have one, or with a bicycle, my family doesn't know that what I am doing. I'm telling my family members I'm going to the office. And then I may carry a pillion rider and drop him or her at a certain point of time to earn my livelihood. Nobody knows about me. So that is an option. So it doesn't really dent my kind of reputation, my kind of prestige, status in the society that the middle class mentality probably had. So that is one thing. Second is that when we, Shubhabrato rightly pointed about the electrification and displacing of the pankha pullers. Yes, of course, I mean, in any case, that observation is well taken. But whenever new technologies arrive, the older forms of labor, they are replaced by new forms of labor. That is quite common. But the fact that I wanted to highlight is that how, the new technologies are supposed to, I'm emphasizing supposed to, desubjugate the labor. But what is happening in the neoliberal economy, what Hayek once, talked about so seriously, we are again being subjugated with the new technologies. Why it is techno-feudalism? Because we are going back to a stage, or a new stage maybe, where even the rights or the forms of claim making that we used to have in the traditional industrial capitalism, that is also being lost. That is also being taken away. So that is why many social scientists would argue now that it is an era also of techno-feudalism, when this digital technology, and now we are waiting for the artificial intelligence. This is only beginning. And therefore, it is, likely to do many more things, and it is likely to impact the lives of labor, because artificial intelligence has the potential, as we hear, that it can displace all kinds of labor. Not only the manual labor, but also the people who boast of their intellectual labor. But why do you need a teacher in the class? There is no need. So lectures would be recorded, and the students will listen to them, either in their colleges or universities or schools or online. And then there would be an interactive session where you can ask questions to your teacher. So these are new realities which we have to remember. Now, when Shomata is talking about, that Blinkit, or for that matter, any other grocery item delivery system, you will notice that during the last 6 months, there has been a stiff competition among these platforms, among these companies. And therefore, they are now setting up what we now call dark stores. These are not big warehouses which you have in Dankuni area or Shankrail area or Panchda in Howrah, close to Kolkata. They are basically in different nook and corner of the city. Even where we stay, you will find a house, one floor or half a floor, one room maybe. Usually it's a bigger room where you can accommodate all the items. It may be biscuits, it may be shampoos, it may be shampoo sachets, it may be soaps, anything. So that would be stacked there, and the delivery persons or partners, whatever you call them, they will pick up whenever there is a demand, they will pick up from these dark stores and they will deliver to the nearby places. So when we talk about mapping, there are two systems of mapping. The kind of physical cartography we are used to we now have to probably, look at the social cartography and the changing social cartography. How these entrepreneurs, these platform companies, they are mapping the city. You will notice that Google and other companies, all of them are mapping any city to the utmost detail. And similarly, these companies also, who are delivering these things and who are, ride-hailing apps like Uber, Ola, and so on and so forth, they are also mapping. And another is mapping by the local labor, the partner, or whatever you may call them. Sometimes they are not so literate. When you ride an Uber, sometimes even with the map in front of the driver, he won't be able to, understand which way to go. He will ask you, should I go right or should we take left? Because he can't understand. And he cannot follow English. Nowadays there are Hindi versions, but even then sometimes they cannot. Because even as so-called educated people, some of us cannot really read the maps. And these poor fellows are in a worse kind of situation. So I think this is important. And the last question was about one-dimensional man. One-dimensional man, that idea was by Herbert Marcuse when he wrote that book in the 20th century. And it was about, how when many people like Marx and others, they had a dream of a revolution, proletarian revolution. And why that revolution was not taking place when the capitalism was maturing more. The point he raised here, that primarily even in a consumerist society, which is becoming more and more consumerist nowadays in neoliberal economy, we find that people are becoming so consumerist, even whom we call proletariat, whom we call labor, workers, they also have aspirations. They also have aspirations for themselves, for their family members. Therefore, even a laborer, even a fish vendor, a vegetable vendor in the market, nowadays he or she also requires a smartphone. Because if he or she doesn't have a smartphone, his or her customers will disappear. They will procure all kinds of items from the shopping mall while they will go there with their carts, or they will order in Blinkit or Big Basket or wherever they find easier and cheaper, and that's all. Therefore, she or he will also sit with a kind of smartphone. It may be a second-hand one, and she or he will also take care. Yes, madam, how much fish do you require? Today I have these, and someone from my shop will deliver at your doorstep. So that is the changing pattern. Therefore, if we call, or if we recall the idea of one-dimensional man, it is in a different shape, because we are becoming one-dimensional, because we are becoming more and more consumerist, more and more self-centered. We are more concerned about ourselves, not about the fellow citizens. I think I will stop here.
So I think capitalism is like finding survival in techno-feudalism through that. I just want to first take these questions, and then I have one on the experiences of labor. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, sir, for a very stimulating lecture. I just want to know, sir, since you cited the example of Rakesh, who is a Zomato delivery person. I just wanted to ask, sir, from your explanation of Rakesh's way of life as to how you cited, so if we can take a cue from there, can we please say that this new laboring class in a post-industrial city is a doubly exploited class in comparison to a factory labor?
Good afternoon, sir. My question was actually very similar to what Ram just asked. So, since this is a post-industrial society right now, and since we were talking about the migrant laborers from other states to here, what would be the new conjecture on the labor laws? Since we have minimum wages act for traditional forms of labor, but laborers in this maybe a double exploitation, who do they go to? So where is the system of checks and balances and the new labor laws for a very new kind of techno-feudal society? Thank you.
Thank you, Sabyasachi, for revisiting the long history of the city and its transformation and situating the changing dynamics of labor and capital in that particular context. So a lot of questions have come up. So in my understanding, the kind of transformation that you have talked about, the new labor is connected with the new capital also. And the trajectory of capital has also changed. So a concrete case have in mind in the heart of Kolkata is the South City Mall. So as we all know that it was the Usha factory and thousands of workers worked there, and overnight they are displaced, and the meaning of production has changed. What we call the service sector, actually that is the site of consumption. So in that perspective we should make the new history of labor. And I think that the instances that you have cited, that is the basic logic of neoliberal capital, to make workers footloose. That is, we find diverse forms of such footloose labor, both in the traditional sector as well as the new so-called quote-unquote service sector that is coming up. And a short reflection on the kind of theoretical categories that have been invoked in the light of your discussion, that the techno-feudalism. Actually, I feel that Marx thought of some kind of freedom in the context of the feudalism. But when you are invoking techno-feudalism, so associated or embedded in this conceptualization of techno-feudalism is some kind of unfreedom. But I think that here the feudalism takes a deep new meaning. This feudalism does not exist outside capital, but it is the logic of capital, new capital. It is some kind of accumulation by disposition, in the language of David Harvey. So I think that theoretical categories are always abstract. So what is important is to visit ethnographically that how these new categories, or how these new, and we also talk about the rentier capitalism and regarding the logic of finance capital. And I will just point out, we have mostly focused on the platform economy in the light of the new labor, but the platforms are connected with the sense of industrial labor. I have in mind the automobile sector in the Gurgaon region. That is the driving sector of the economy. But there the labor is manual, the material labor. But that is also connected with platforms, because I know that all the big companies keep track of the mobile numbers and the whereabouts of the workers. In moments of strike, they take advantage of those reserve army of labor. So while reading the story of capital, we should not only focus our attention on the new sectors that are coming up, but how the platforms or the new technologies are connected with getting connected with the so-called industrial sector to create new kinds of unfreedom. That should be also be taken into consideration. Thank you.
I have a question for sir. So, the experiences through reordering of space and reordering of bodies that you have mentioned, I'm just wondering whether these kinds of experiences are fragmented or heightened in terms of identities of caste, of gender, of particularly now also of religious identities. So the footloose labor, that's you have talked about footloose labor and Usha factory. Also, I was, when Usha factory reopened, I remember I was in college and I was coming back from college, and I saw this, very happy faces that the factory has opened again. And then within a few months, the factory closed down. And one of the conductors had then told me, when I asked what happened to them and the pavement dwellers here, the one answer he gave me was, উন্নয়নের ধাক্কায় আর টিকতে পারেনি. That the force of development was so much that they couldn't cope up with this. So if these...
Everywhere. I used to taught in a college by the side of the Ganges. There is the famous Bongolokhi cotton of the Swadeshi era. So more than 10,000 workers work there. But over that, the Bongolokhi closing started, and over time, now in the Gangadhar is coming up, that it is a new Unno Kolkata, different Kolkata for the high of urban Medina. I think that this is a story of accumulation. So we should also follow, read Marx in a new context, with new categories also.
When I talk about Rakesh, he's not a Zomato worker. He's a, Uber or Ola driver. The point is that whether it is, double exploitation, double jeopardy. Yes, I forgot to answer Shamata's last question about the climate change and the impact on labor. The point is that she was right that the earlier forms of labor, industrial labor in particular, they used to work in a factory shed. It had its limitations, it had its inadequacies and other challenges, but they were in a way protected from, particularly the industrial workers, protected from the extremes of weather. But when these people are working outside throughout the year, day and night, they are exposed to this kind of situation. So that way, it is definitely a double jeopardy. But I will come to the issue of precarity and unfreedom. Because, yes, Arubda, you were talking about Gurgaon factory of Suzuki. You were right. I mean, how the financial capital, new forms of capital, they are using platforms. But that is also being used for new kinds of exploitation. Because as I mentioned, that there has been, since the 1990s in particular, there has been a large-scale informalization and casualization and contractualization of labor. And therefore, in the same factory of Gurgaon, you must have noticed better than me, that only a few laborers, they are permanent workers. And most of them are high up in the hierarchy. They are managers, supervisors, this kind of people. The ordinary workers, they are mostly contractual workers. So they may lose their job when production is reduced due to lack of demand in the market, or when the country shut down for the COVID-19 pandemic and the cars were not selling. So there was a shutdown. So even sometimes the recent data indicate that the country now has 800,000 cars lying in the showrooms. There is no buyer. And therefore, these automobile companies are considering that they have to reduce the days of production per month. So the first casualty would be the casual laborers who are, used whenever the production goes up. So the mobile numbers, all these records, the database is kept in the factory in order to call those additional surplus labor whenever they are required. Otherwise, they are not required. So this has been happening.
You are absolutely correct. More than 70% of Maruti workers are migrants.
Absolutely.
Few local residents area, they are evicted.
That's right. Second thing is that whenever we are talking about the forms of labor, there were several points here. Even from the earlier days, if we take the example I mentioned about construction labor. So construction was going on even earlier, from earlier days. Now construction is more, intensive in the urban areas for several reasons, as I mentioned. And therefore, if you go to Shialda station any morning, or Ultadanga station for that matter, you will find from 5 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock or 9:30, particularly in the weekends more in number, the people from different parts migrating, or, as daily commuters, they have come here in search of livelihood. If someone, recruits at least 8 or 10 of them, so their day will be made. Otherwise, they have to go back home without any income. So these are changing. And only thing is that, as I indicated, that having a smartphone or having a mobile phone at least, that is a saving grace. Because if that mobile number is with you, you are the recruiter, you are the employer, then I can find an opportunity to work with you, at least on certain days. Otherwise, I don't have anything. Just like the fish vendors or anyone. So even just like when we are using apps, even the fish vendors or vegetable vendors, they have to use them. Otherwise, people won't come to them. Oh, you don't have this? Okay, we'll go to the shopping mall or elsewhere where I can use those QR code and all that. So they are also having that. So these are always happening with the changes of, technology. But the point you mentioned, which is very important, I have a larger paper, but there is no time to go into that, which is about, how Marx looked at the commodification of labor in the first volume of Capital, and why it is important in the 21st century, including Thomas Piketty's observation, Capital in the 21st century. And how, techno-feudalism is not my term. That is by one of the Italian intellectuals. I've just borrowed that term. The point is that it is not really, when Marx talked about feudalism, he had something in mind that at least there was some element of freedom, some scope of freedom, which capitalism, polishes it off. So when I'm talking about, or when someone else is talking about techno-feudalism, it is not really going back to the days of freedom, those good old days, golden days. It's not that. It's a new kind of unfreedom. It's a new kind of precarity, a new kind of uncertainty. I don't know, I have a job today, but I don't know what will happen to me tomorrow. And so many people in my family, they depend on my income. So what would happen to them? So that kind of uncertainty, and that also has, psychological impact. And that is why many people are becoming ill and unable to perform, because they have to be good and docile bodies. They have to perform at the right point of time. So that is the idea. Oh, yes. Sorry. Thank you for reminding me. The point is that, yes, I fully agree with you in the sense that these technologies are loaded with this kind of identities and this kind of structural inequalities, if I may use the term. Because all these identities of caste and gender and religion, ethnicity, all are, embedded in the system. So whenever I am enlisting my name and, including my mobile number, so it is mentioned, most of the people in India, they would be able to realize that which caste I may belong to, and particularly which religion I may belong to. And of course, gender. And therefore, there is a bias, and we still are living in it is unpalatable, but it is true that we are living in a patriarchal society even now. And therefore, all these biases are working. And we find many instances, I could not go here into detail, that there you will find that I have told you a story about Rakesh Kumar. So he is more privileged in a sense among these people. But there are people who belong to the religious minorities, and therefore they feel that their rating has been reduced. Particularly in cases of food delivery, that why a Muslim minority delivery person should deliver food to me. So in a way, the caste system or the religious kind of differences, which somehow not really disappeared, somehow it became weaker, probably they are coming back with a vengeance with these new technologies. Thank you.
Okay, there's one more.
cannot simply hope of any such labor laws or any kind of unionization of labor in this platform economy. In fact, if you talk about Elon Musk, yesterday we found a news when some 1,20,000 people will be sacked overnight. So the very security, job security, it will not secure for the top level officers. Next day they get up and they receive a mail that your service is no longer required. So this kind of security in this new economy is not absolutely impossible thing. It's beyond our imagination.
Especially when the company is aided by the nation to protect the company's interests.
Okay, I forgot to answer the question about the labor law that you asked, quite rightly. The point is that, yes, but these labor laws are applied more in the formal sector. It has been so. And unfortunately, the fact remains that most of the workers in Indian economy, they are working in the informal sector, number one. Number two, with the emergence of these new digital technologies and all that, and even with the emergence of information technology and other kinds of emerging sectors in the economy, we find that labor laws don't apply. Please don't forget that what two leading industrialists of the country mentioned the other day, that you are supposed to work 70 hours a week. Another one went further, 90 hours. And what should we do? What should you do? Staying at home, looking at the face of your wife. Someone mentioned. So the point is that that is the mindset, and we also have to remember that new forms of capital he was talking about, and capitalism. It is also, tied with the state, the political power. And therefore, in this form of political power, the political economy that is emerging, new political economy, here labor is excluded. Labor is as if it is not required. They are disembodied, docile bodies. But if you look at this kind of alliance between capital and the political power, you will find that this is quite common, and the laws which are there already on paper, they are useless. Nobody is talking about the labor laws. And please also, I would like to draw your attention to one fact. How many trade union movements have we seen recently? Over the last 10, 15 years, there are so many labor laws, Factories Act, how many hours I am supposed to work. There are so many, except one major strike for, I think, 49 days or something, in the Samsung's factory in Tamil Nadu. Late last year in 2024. There is no strike. No strike to mention. Why? Where have all the trade union leaders gone? Have they disappeared? All the trade union laws have been erased? No. But the situation, the context has totally changed. And now the forms of capital, the logic of capital also has changed. And therefore, those laws are now archaic laws. You cannot apply those laws anymore. You have to reinvent the legal system, legal ecosystem, for which probably we are not ready. We are not yet ready. Thank you. And also have to remember about crony capitalism. It's not a theoretical construct only. That is hard reality in many countries, including you mentioned, or someone mentioned Elon Musk, everywhere. Why Elon Musk has been made one of the leading advisors to President Donald Trump.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. And for the questions. I think it was a very lively session. So we'll wrap up, and I'll ask Moniparna to deliver the vote of thanks. And then there's tea and snacks outside. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sabyasachi Basu Roy Chaudhury, for such an insightful and engaging lecture. I would also like to thank Dr. Shorbani Bandopadhyay for seamlessly coordinating today's session. I would now ask Dr. Shorbani Bandopadhyay to present a token of appreciation to our esteemed speaker for being here today. I would like to thank Calcutta Research Group for organizing such an enlightening lecture. I would like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to our principal, Reverend Dr. Dominic Savio, Professor Bertram Da Silva, Vice Principal, Arts and Science, Dr. Farhad Bano, Dean of Arts, Dr. Indranath Chaudhury, Dean of Science, and the Head of the Department of Sociology, Dr. Zaidal Basit, for their constant support, encouragement, and vision in organizing these valuable events. We are thankful to two members of the staff from the Principal's Office, Monica and Philip, for their assistance. I would also like to thank Mr. Sujit for his technical support. Lastly, I would like to thank the student volunteers for their invaluable support in organizing today's event. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for attending today's lecture. I would request all of you to kindly step outside the hall where refreshments have been served. Thank you.